Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me today on our topic of consumer insights. Today's lecture is called Insight Out Uncovering the Hidden Truths of Consumer Behavior. My name's Loni Peterson, and I'm a full time professor at CU Boulder, and I have a wedding planning business, and I'm located in Denver, Colorado. This topic is something I teach on a regular basis at CU Boulder, and I'm super excited to bring it here for you all and your businesses. So, first, an insight basically is where it all starts. It's a deep understanding of behaviors, preferences, and motivations. We have to know these things in order for the moves we make to make sense and to connect with our buyers. This quote I find really interesting and something to think about. The customer's perception is your reality. How the customer views you, your brand, your product is your reality. How are you connecting with them? How are they connecting with you? How are they finding you? How do they like to engage with your product or service? So, why are insights so important? As I mentioned at the top, insights are where it all starts. If you were to work at an ad agency or a marketing firm and your boss comes down the line with a big ask, should we do this PR stunt? Should we make this big change? All of that has to stem from insights. This is where information and consumer behavior connect. Knowing insights about your brand and how your people connect with you is so important to not wasting your marketing dollars and to actually make sure that that big ask or that new thing that you want to do is going to work. So, insights will help you do a couple of things. And these are the top three, I think, when having good insights and knowing your target audience will help you do. First and foremost, it'll help you improve customer experience. So, having clear insights on how your customer engages with you, your brand, and your product will only improve customer experience, which will then encourage them to tell their friends, share with their groups, and hopefully attract more buyers and more customers. Another thing that we talk about a lot in the marketing and advertising world is you make data driven decisions. Marketing and advertising is not throwing spaghetti at the wall and seeing what sticks. You have to make decisions based off data. With larger companies, I mean, and even small businesses, your marketing dollars are precious, and you want to be sure that you're putting them in the right places to do the work for you to get that return. You can waste a ton of money doing all of the wrong things, and that's where insights really come into play to make sure you're making data driven decisions and connecting with your audience in a meaningful way. And that brings me to the third element here, building long term relationships. If you truly understand how your customers interact with your brand or product, why they come to you, what you're providing for them, what problem you're solving, you're going to continue to nurture that relationship as they develop as a buyer, as your company develops their offerings, as your product goes into 2.0. You're going to continue keeping those customers right along with you and build those long term relationships. So, what is an insight? Boils down to a deep understanding or accurate and intuitive perception of a complex situation, concept, or a problem. We would be nowhere without insights. We can't make proper decisions that will actually bring us a return without proper insights. So, there are 9 types of insights that I lecture on with my college students, but I'm going to bring us the top 3 later in this lecture that we can focus on. If you want to download the worksheet, the other 6 are listed in the worksheet with definitions to help you work through the most robust insight process you can. But for today, we're going to focus on 3. Okay, so how do we even find our insight? It starts with knowing your target audience and doing some really good research. This usually surprises my students when I open this topic. This class, when I teach it, is 80% research. And then the final 20% is the analysis. How can you apply that research? How does that research, what does that data say about your people? So, knowing your target audience or audiences and conducting really good research is going to help you build the best possible insights to improve your product and your brand and your business. Okay, so I'm going to repeat this slide a little bit throughout. Um, Insights equals data plus emotion. Why do people interact with your brand? Why do people go to your website? Why do people tell their friends and family about your thing? So, knowing the reasons why people are behaving, the emotion behind decision making, the meaningful connection they have with the product, plus this data, these hard facts proving this is why they're doing that thing, is an insight. So we have to start with the research to build our scope of our insight. And then you, as a business owner or analyst or marketing professional on your team, you will then apply the emotion portion to it to build out your robust insight. Okay, so how the heck do we even do research? There's two buckets. First, we have primary research and secondary research. We're going to need to do both. They both have their pros and cons, they both have their ups and downs, but knowing your company and what you're hoping to find will help you navigate where more energy might need to be placed, whether it's primary or secondary, and how you're going to collect all that information. So, to break these two things down a little bit further, primary research is research you do yourself. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about that. Research I do myself includes sending out surveys, holding a focus group, sending out interview requests, one on one conversations, observations. Okay, so when I say research you do yourself, it is the physical collection of the data that you do yourself. This means you own this information. Okay, this is one of the bonuses of primary research. You own this information that you have collected, and you can craft the survey questions that you ask your constituents. You can build your focus groups with all of your target audiences that you'd like to connect with. Primary research is going to be so telling with what you think your consumer thinks about your brand and what they actually think about your brand. So, primary research, again, research you do yourself. It is information that I collect with my two hands and my two eyes, and I collect the information firsthand, and therefore I own this information. So the buddy to primary research is secondary research. This is someone else's research. These are going to be articles, journals in scholarly databases. If you have a Forbes article, if you've got something out there that someone else has already collected the information, you can apply that data to your brand and your product. So where secondary research is a bonus is it's free. It's the time that you want to take to finding the articles, reading the articles, taking the information. Okay. So secondary research is a little less expensive, a little less time inducing than primary research, but you are using someone else's research. So you don't own this information. You have to cite it if you were to post a quote or a stat, and it's all applicable information to your brand and your business. So what I mean by that, it's kind of like a case study. Can you find a brand or a company that does something like you do or serves an audience like you do, and you can showcase their trajectory or talk through one of their challenges, and you can apply what they did to your own business and product, but again, you do not own that information. Okay, so the other system for research is breaking it into two categories of qualitative and quantitative. I'm sure you have heard these terms, talked about them in school, but let's do a crash course on these two terms and their definitions. So, qualitative, when I think about this, and I think about the first half of this word is quality. What is the quality of the information, which to me represents the emotion, the firsthand experience, the interview questions, right? So, all of those primary research type items are going to kind of fall under this qualitative category. And then the opposite here is quantitative. And again, if we take that first chunk of the word, quantity, think numbers. So that's going to be your data, your research, your ROIs, your percentages, all those wonderful pieces of secondary research that you were able to do. So, as you're collecting information, as you're going through and trying to figure out what type of content you're hoping to gather for your brand, for your product, for your specific business, you're going to start categorizing them in these four things: primary, secondary, qualitative, and quantitative. So, my next slide here will help dissect these two terms a little bit more. Qualitative, as we said, it's descriptive, it's subjective, non numerical analysis, people's emotions, feedback, surveys, firsthand experience is going to be that qualitative data. On the other hand, here we've got our quantitative, which is going to be numerical, objective, and data driven analysis. Okay, so we've got two very different types of information that we're gathering, both useful, and both types of research have to be done. So, putting those two things together, again, qualitative and primary are going to be buddies. You're probably going to find a lot of your primary research is going to bring up a lot of that qualitative data. I enjoyed buying this, or this product tasted so good because of these things. I emotionally am connected to this product because XYZ. Okay. The quantitative is going to be coupled with secondary. What are those articles? What research are you collecting from someone else's studies? What is the data? What is the quantitative numerical information you're looking to get? Okay, again, nice friendly reminder. Insights equal data plus emotion. So data here is going to be our quantitative information, and emotion is going to be our qualitative. What are people's feelings and emotions? What can we assess out of their behavior in addition to attaching some data to it? Okay, so here we are with our top three insights that I think you need to know from this lecture to get you off on a running start writing your own insights. So, the three we're going to talk about are consumer insights, product insights, and future insights. So, depending on what your brand, product, service, whatever it is that you're trying to build a better understanding about, each one of these insights will be written slightly different. So you need to go into writing your insights with that big ask, with the big change. Are you adding something to your services and you're wondering, is this a good ad? You are a catering company and you're looking to add a new food service. What are these insights and how are they going to be written tailored to your business and your goals? We're going to start out with some definitions. Okay, so we've got consumer insights number one. A consumer insight shows an understanding about consumer behaviors, their needs, motivations to inform a decision. This is the bread and butter. Why do people interact with your brand? Why do they choose to purchase? Why do they come back? So, consumer insights is really going to be that foundational insight to understanding your target audience with your qualitative data, with your quantitative, and then assessing the data that you've collected for that emotional output of why people interact with your brand. The next definition here is product insights. So, product, again, this word can be shifted based off of what you're offering. If it is a physical, hard product, or maybe it's a package that you offer, that's still a product. So, be sure you identify what product means to you and your company before you start writing an insight for this. So, product insight. This shows an understanding of how a product meets consumer needs or solves a problem. I want to stop there and reread that last line. Solves a problem. What problem are you solving for your buyers? What are you doing that makes them want to come back time and time again? Or if you're a one-stop shop service, like for myself, wedding planning, why do they tell their friends about your product? What is it? Okay, so I don't know if you all have heard of Seth Godin. He's one of my favorite marketers and writers. He's got a really fun point of view on solving a problem as it relates to the fax machine. So we didn't realize we had a problem until somebody created the fax machine. And the problem created was we needed other people to have fax machines so that we could communicate with one another. Using that metaphor into your business, what problem are you solving or creating with your product? This will help you write that insight. And our final insight for this lecture, we will talk about future insights. We all want to know what next year is going to bring. We all want to predict trends. We all want to predict our revenue streams. But I'm sure you have seen time and time again, it is so hard to nail down exactly what will happen in the future. However, using our research methods, qualitative, quantitative, right, and projections, we can write future insights to help us prepare for specific times of year. For example, if you are a business that offers something special during the holidays, we can go back and gather historical information about what happened in the last quarter of the year, gearing up for holiday sales. And so then we can better project a future insight of what next year's holiday could look like, or how can we ramp it up? If it's not the holiday, maybe it's your busy season. When is your busiest time of year? When's your downtime? When do people book your services? So, all of these things can be categories within a future insight. A future insight shows an anticipation of trends, behaviors, or innovations that shape strategies. So, what can we think about the future and our consumer working together? How do we shape strategies? How do we engage for the holidays? What's our runway that we need to engage for the holidays? Or what does that booking season look like? What internally should we be doing? Anywho, what does future look like for you and your company? Okay, so this is a maybe triggering question. Do you start with an insight or an Instagram post? I know. Social media is so fun. We love it. But Instagram is an action driven output. Okay, so if you're, and think about what I mentioned earlier, Instagram is your spaghetti. Okay, we're not just throwing spaghetti at the walls. If you just post a post for the sake of posting, you're not going to hit the mark. So, what do you think? Do we start with an insight or an Instagram post? Big reveal here. Not Instagram. We want to start with insights and data driven decisions before we put the time and energy into creating content for our social platforms. And this again can be segued into your website, your flyers, your other platforms that you know your people are on, whether that is TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, you name it. Okay. So we got to start with insights and data driven decisions before we start posting on the internet. Okay. So I'm a big fan of formulas, especially with something as complex as writing an insight. So we have a little bit of a data sandwich here. So if you remember back, when we would write thesis statements in high school into college, you had a thesis statement formula, okay? This because of that. So we have a whole system down for thesis statements. I want you to think of an insight formula as the same thing. So we're going to start off with a piece of data, okay? And remember our three insights: consumer, product, future. So we want that piece of data to match that insight that we are writing, okay? So we have a piece of data, we're going to write which means, and we're going to connect another piece of data to that sentence. So while you're in this process, do not think you have to squeeze all of these words in a 10-word sentence. Insights can be a little lengthy. It is okay if they're two sentences, three, maybe four. So, what is the most pertinent piece of data that you need to relate to either your consumer, your product, or your future insight? So, first opening piece of data, which means Find another piece of data that buddies and matches and restates the first piece of data you found, because we're going to write because. And now here is where that emotion part comes out. This is your analysis time. What does that data even mean? Okay. How can we analyze this? How do we put that into the motivations of our buyer, the behaviors of our buyer? Why do they tell people? Why is this new product going to be a good idea? Why is adding this new flavor gonna be the best thing that's ever happened? So follow this formula. Find your data connected to the insight that you're writing. Add in which means. Find some more data. Get it super supportive. Because, and then your analysis, okay? What is the emotion? What is the why? What is that output we can now analyze, suggest, hope for, because we've got data to support it. Okay, so bear with me here. These are longer examples. I know, lots of words, but this is what I mean. Do not try to squeeze your insights into one sentence that's 10 words. Okay, we have data, we've got stats, we have things that you found. So here is an excerpt of an insight from one of my recent college students. Okay, so she was working for Pepsi as her brand, and her big ask was we should acquire Poppy because they are doing the prebiotic, probiotic sodas, and Pepsi has the biggest platform for that. And so Poppy, it would make sense to acquire as a brand segment. But here are the insights that we had to come up with. So let's find all the pieces first. So where's our data? Pepsi's a legacy soda brand that has a large scale share in the soda market because there is a growing consumer demand for healthier beverage options, particularly among Gen Z millennials, as demonstrated by the 20% annual growth in functional soda category. Okay, look at that big stat. We can show that it would be a good idea for Pepsi to acquire Poppy because Gen Z and millennials care about what Poppy offers, and there's been a 20% growth in that target audience for a functional soda. Okay. And then another fun fact, Poppy is the 11th fastest growing beverage brand, surpassed 100 million in sales, which means acquiring Poppy would allow Pepsi to tap into the health conscious, younger demographic, aligning with the trend towards functional and health focused beverages. So we've got a full circle insight here. We've got our foundation of Pepsi. We've got some stats about our target audience and their behaviors. And then we've got the why, the analysis. It would make sense to have Pepsi acquire Poppy because our target audience, Gen Zs and millennials, are our biggest audience for this brand. And feel free to pause the lecture so you can read and dissect these. Feel free, do what you got to do. Let's go look at another example. So here's our product insight example. Same topic here. Pepsi acquires Poppy. All right, so we've got to open with our data. Poppy reported 100% year over year sales increase in 2023, indicating strong growth, which means consumers are enjoying this product because Poppy offers a unique combination of prebiotic benefits while successfully mocking soda flavors. It's available in all of these stores, which means Pepsi can leverage Poppy's successful product and market presence, to enhance its own portfolio. So here we show where the product is being sold, the retailer leverage that Pepsi has, and the buyers that go to those places. We're showcasing that perfect match again to show that yes, Pepsi should acquire Poppy. Now, these are hypotheticals, these are student work. This is probably not happening, but they all had to come up with a big ask as it related to a major brand. So again, product driven insight. Make sure that your data talks about which insight you're focusing on. Product here, where it's being offered, who's buying it, and who's going to those places. And then again, a closure of the analysis of why it makes sense. All right, our final example is going to be on future. Okay, so the healthy beverage market is projected to grow at a rate of 8.1% through 2030, driven by increasing consumer interest in health and wellness. Because younger consumers prioritize products with health benefits. Poppi is now the leading health soda market and continues to grow in sales. This means acquiring Poppi positions PepsiCo to lead in a high growth market segment, which would secure a future competitive edge. Again, if you're finding yourself writing the same type of insight, meaning all of these point to Pepsi should acquire Poppi, you're on the right track. Okay. Now, also, when we wrote papers in high school and college, you didn't have to always prove the positive. You could also say, this is not a good idea. So while you're writing your insights, while you're collecting data, you might also find that your big ask probably isn't a good idea. Adding that new flavor may not really hit with the target audience you were hoping it for. So, the opposite of this would be great is always something to consider while writing your insights. Okay, so that was fast and furious. So, our recap today is research is your best friend. When writing insights, you have to start with the research. Okay, we have primary, things you get yourself, secondary, research you go collect from someone else's article, and then your qualitative and quantitative categories. Okay, what are the emotions? What is the quality of that data? And then quantitative, the numbers, the data, the research. What are all four of those categories going to do working together to write your insights? Before diving into any of this, think about what you want to do research on. Is it business development? Is it a new product? Is it a new package offering? I don't know. Think through what you're wanting to get research and get dialed in on, and then figure out the best route for that research and collection of information. So, as mentioned, I've got a worksheet for you that has all 9 insights listed with definitions. It's got the formula on there for you. So, please scan that QR code, enter your contact information, and I will send you that worksheet personally. You can email. If you have any questions, you can connect with me on Instagram at Onstage with Loni, and then also my website here, LoniPeterson.com. So, thank you again so much for sitting through this lecture on insights for consumer product and future. I hope you are excited and rejuvenated to think big for your business and worry about the research and doing data driven decisions and not just throwing that spaghetti at the wall. Thank you again. And I look forward to seeing those emails come through to get your worksheets and to connect with you guys at a later date. Thanks again.